Alright.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Howard and this is Melissa Sachs. We're the co-founders and owners of Scotch Drinkers Only. This is our first webcast and interactive tasting, hopefully the first of many. Today we'll be featuring Lady of the Glen and the brand ambassador, Paul Mckendrick. We're thrilled to be the exclusive US importer for Lady of the Glen because they just have tremendous products. And if you're fortunate enough to have the tasting kits or the bottles, you'll know the quality of the liquid and how much attention to detail that goes into the products. We were fortunate enough actually to do a warehouse tasting with Paul back in the spring and just marvelous stuff they have there. But one of the great things that they have that I think sets them apart as an independent bottler from others is just the access they have to the warehouse to be able to monitor and control and bottle the spirits when they're right. As an aside, if you ever are fortunate enough to do the warehouse tasting with Paul, I would just warn you to make sure you have nothing else productive you have to do with the remainder of your day because you'll be, you'll be treated pretty well, and there won't be anything after the whiskey tasting that you'll be able to do um, too well. One of the things that I really found fascinating, and we'll be tasting it a little bit later, is there's a Kulila that was an exclusive pick that we did with Lady the Glen and an Octave, and it's just a few days short of a 10 year. And I remember chatting with Gregor Hanna, the owner of Lady the Glen, about why he didn't just let it go another week or two so he could put 10 year on the label. And he told me, Howard, when the time is right, the time is right. And so that they chose the right time to bottle, not based on an appearance, but just based on what would do justice to the incredible liquid inside. With us today, and what I'm calling our tasting panel to make this a little more fun and interactive, because we just have a lot of appreciation for their palates and knowledge and experience with Scotch. We have with us Art and Todd from our local whiskey club, the Whiskey Cabinet in Florida. If you ever happen to be in Florida or need an excuse for a trip to Florida, I highly recommend um, trying to attend one of their tastings. So thank you very much for participating with us today. And Melissa, do you want to
Sure. So, and then
chat?
we also have Leanne, aka Scotch on the Bayou. There you can see on her tag. She is Scotch on the Bayou on Instagram and YouTube. Leanne runs a great group over there. She does a live stream on YouTube every other Tuesday night at 9 p.m. And she's got a super group of people from really across the globe that she interacts with. She usually does some fabulous tastings and just general whiskey banter and talk and news. So if you haven't followed Leanne or joined her, please give her a follow and support. And finally, we have Chris Brown, also known as the Isla enthusiast on Instagram and Facebook. Chris does a number of tastings across venues, mainly focused in southeastern PA. He's a huge Scotch advocate, support of independent bottlers and smaller distilleries. Chris just loves Scotland to travel. He's been to Scotland a bunch, as all of our panelists have. So we thank them all for joining us today to hopefully make it a little more interesting than just Howard and I interacting with Paul.
No one wants to hear us.
So I will just mention one more thing about Lady of the Glen. If anyone is not familiar, they were awarded Whiskey Magazine's Icons of Whiskey, the Scottish Independent Bottler of the Year for 3 years in a row right now. So 2022, 2023, and 2024. So we're just really excited for all of these whiskeys that we're going to share and taste through today. And I think after this, everyone will understand why they have won that award for 3 years in running. So,
Yeah. One thing before we pass it to Paul, I know we have a lot of knowledgeable people that have bought the kits, but these Lady of the Glen bottles at cask strength in a lot of these expression and high proof, and because of U.S. regulations, the standard size for bottles is 50 mil. So these are large pours. You don't Please don't drink the whole pour. We would recommend that you do about half per pour out of the bottle, about 25 mil, or less if that's okay. But if you're not used to drinking high proof whiskeys, there's a lot of flavor. We love all the flavor, but there's also a lot of alcohol that goes along with it. So just as a friendly piece of knowledge as to what we would recommend, we would recommend you go about half per serving, and then we would like to pass the baton over to Paul to lead us, and then we'll follow your lead. Thank you, Paul.
No problem, Howard. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. It really is a pleasure and a privilege to join you guys and obviously share a few of our drams on a Saturday evening here anyway. It's a great time for a dram any time of the day, to be honest, as we were discussing. But no, it really is. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for the confidence you have and the quality of the whiskey by buying the packs. Hopefully you'll taste these tonight and you'll see a little bit of very high praise from Howard and Melissa there. Obviously, whatever we did when they came to visit us in the warehouse, it worked. They left with big smiles on their faces. And of course that was all to do with the charm that Gregor and I have, and maybe something to do with the whiskey as well. But there's there's a good story to tell, and it's again, I'm so grateful to have this platform to share that story with you. So my name's Paul, brand ambassador for Hannah Whiskey Merchants, which is the parent company for Lady of the Glen. We are an independent bottler, classic independent bottler by definition. We don't have our own distillery. We buy casks from distillers, from brokers, from anyone who basically wants to sell us a cask of whiskey. If we like the taste of that whiskey, it goes into a bottle with our label on it, and that's what I mean by a classic independent bottler. We're obliged to create brands in order to bottle those whiskies, and Lady of the Glen is our main brand. And of course, most of the whiskies that we bottle, the ones that we really push at the forefront and represent what we're all about, are those from Lady of the Glen. Two other brands we're going to try tonight as well. So we can share the stories as we go along about why we created these brands and what they represent. Back in 2012, Howard mentioned Gregor. Gregor is the founder of the company, Gregor Hannah, hence the name Hannah Whiskey Merchants. He founded the company and basically ran the company all himself for the most part of the existence of the company until 2020 when I joined, and then the workforce was doubled. But yeah, he got to a point where could justify taking someone on as a brand ambassador sales. And that allowed Gregor to run the business, source the casks, do all boring stuff, and then getting the message out there, spreading the word, telling the story to myself, which is basically a dream come true for me, because although this is my job, it pays the bills. First and foremost, like many of you guys, I am a whiskey drinker. It's my hobby, my passion as well. So I hope that comes us in the way, and certainly makes working evenings and weekends much more fun if you enjoy the work you do. So yeah, I'll talk about the business and the company as we're going, and if you're ready, we can just dive into the first whiskey if that suits everybody. Okay, so I'm assuming that's a yes. We're going to start with the Royal Brackla, the Glen. So just a little bit about what Lady of the Glen means. When you see whiskies from Lady of the Glen, they are all from one cask only, single cask whiskies. And as I mentioned earlier on as well, natural cask strength, so no water added. Basically, we taste the whiskies from the casks in the warehouse, and we want to try and get that experience across to you the same way that we had that experience in the warehouse. So, natural strength, no dilution with water, certainly no caramel colouring, and no chill filtration in any of the whiskies that we bottle. So just get that one out there straight off the bat. So Yeah, so the order of the whiskies we're going with, a typical, the way that a whiskey tasting would normally run, starting with what I feel is the lightest whiskey as the good place to begin, moving up towards the more heavier, richer whiskies as we go along. And for me, of the five drams you have, the Royal Brackla was the most obvious one to begin with. Nice and light, nice and fresh, straight out of a refill bourbon cask, which is, to be honest, fairly unusual for us. You'll find out as we go along that we are very prominent with interesting casks and working with different casks, and to create different flavors or to help the whiskey on its journey towards where it could reach its potential. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a good nose and a good palate for tasting a whiskey straight from the cask, where everything about that whiskey is saying, leave me alone, I'm absolutely fine just as I am. And that's what the case was here with this Brackla. Refill barrel is the technical term of the cask. Unfortunately, we only know that means it's had other Scotch whisky in there before. That could be one other Scotch whisky in there before. It could be two or three. Going by the taste of this whisky, I would say it's a second fill barrel. It's had one more Scotch in there before, and then bourbon in before that as well. So well used. But what that does is it allows the spirit quality to come through. And for us, Royal Brackla has always been a distillery that we've kind of regarded very highly in terms of its quality of its spirit. And usually we're not disappointed, bearing in mind that when we buy casks, we don't normally get to try the whiskey before we decide to purchase the cask, but always a good bet for good quality to work with. And this, if you don't know what I mean by that, then hopefully one little taste of this whiskey should confirm that. Again, back to the reasons why we tasted this whiskey, we didn't think it needed any further cask maturation. It didn't need to be put into a sherry cask or a port cask, was just simply because the quality was there. And there's a word that I'm going to use that you'll hear me use quite a few times as the tasting goes on, and make any apologies for it, because it's something that's so fundamental to what we do when it comes to selecting whiskies. And what we're looking for when we select a whiskey is the balance. So balance between distillery character and the cask that it's been in. And if that balance between those two is there, then that's all we need to know whether to bottle that whiskey or not. So for us, the balance between the style of Royal Brackla that makes it unique, that unique distillery character that, I think we're up to 156 malt distilleries in Scotland now. I'm starting to lose count, but many of them anyway. They all have their own unique style, DNA, if you want to call it that. So we're looking to try and harness that, but also add in whatever the cask matures and has added the flavors or taken some of the bad stuff out of there. So once that balance is there, that's what we're looking for. And for us, this was perfect at 15 years old, as an example of this whiskey. And the first thing we actually, Gregor and I, when we opened this cask and we poured a dram of it, the first thing we had to check was, my goodness, is this from 2008? It's only 15 years old, because to me it tasted much older. It tasted like a 20-year-old or 21-year-old whiskey. Such as the quality, such as the well, flavors that have worked together from that time in that cask. It had a kind of tropical fruit character that a mature tropical fruit character that I normally get from older whiskies. And both Greg and I thought this is absolutely fantastic. It's only 15, but it tastes a lot older, which is always a good sign. 54.9%, good place to start as well. Something I don't talk about too much is adding water to whiskey, and that's not because I'm not in favour of adding water to whiskey. I'm just always very cautious about suggesting that you should add water to whiskey, because it's sort of very personal. I think when you're in the cask strength territory, I would say you probably should add water to your whiskey. As Howard mentioned, you've got 50 mils there of whiskey, so that should give you enough room that you could add a little bit of water with confidence, knowing that you know, if you feel you've added a little bit too much, you can always top it up with a wee bit more whiskey. But yeah, I thought this was a great place to start. One of my favourite whiskies in recent times, to be honest. My personal taste, this is right up my avenue for whiskey. You know what? I don't even have any with me. I should have kept a tasting pack of these whiskies back, but such is the nature of what we do, single cask whiskies. You know, we bottle Lady of the Glen quarterly, so 4 times a year. So usually in the period of say 3 to 4 months, we are completely sold out of those bottles. And the only time I get to keep any of the liquid back is, and this is a little personal goal that I set for myself, whereby I get one bottle to use for marketing to sample with customers to work with to try and sell the bottles. If I can sell all 232 bottles in this case of the this is what we got from the cask 232. If I can sell all those without using all of my marketing bottle, I get to keep the rest of the liquid. So, and that was the case. You know, I did have some left, but I was quite fond of it, so I disposed of that the part bottle quite a while ago. So enjoy. I'm jealous of you guys getting to enjoy this one again. I hope you like it. I'm sure there's a way, Howard mentioned, if you've got any questions or any feedback that we could possibly
Yeah,
get that. Is
we
that
have
possible? Or
surfaced,
if not, we can
yeah,
just chat amongst ourselves as well.
some feedback. So Mark has gotten
Yeah, I've got something
fruity,
else in my glass, so
sweet
enjoy.
with citrus note on the palate, and then Brady also noted banana. Um, I definitely get personally. I don't know about you, Melissa. I
Chris,
get
you're the only one in my camera feed here that doesn't seem to be freezing every 10 seconds.
Uh-oh. That well, I guess that's good, right?
And as I yeah.
This is very nice. I definitely get the tropical fruits with it. Very nice.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can perhaps then see why we didn't want to mask that with, you know, sherry or port or anything like that. That would only detract away from that quality from that refill barrel.
I have the YouTube channel chat up, and I'm looking at comments, and I'm seeing light vanilla Barriques on it. And you and I have a lot in common here, friend, because I am definitely getting like a light floral fruit, almost confectioner sugar on the palate at first, and then swooping into the tropical notes of pineapple, like a little bit of a mango banana thing going. And then I get a little bit of heat there on the back end, right? Of spice. And to me, it's almost, but I feel like there's a good bit of wood in there in the finish, but then it kind of goes into this sweet spice, like a caramel cinnamon thing going at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's it has a journey through the glass for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think that's where, you know, that I had the impression of it being an older whiskey. To me, there's a great, again, there's that word balance. You know, the cask, yes, it's a refill cask. I suspect only have been used once before, but again, you know, used once before, but for how long? You know, the whiskey to be called Scotch, of course, it only has to be in the cask for 3 years. So potentially the cask was used before by a blending company. Maybe the whiskey was only in there for 3 or 4 years to make a basic blended Scotch, you know. Royal Brackla is owned by Bacardi Dewar's, so it could have been, you know, used a whiskey used for Dewar's White Label, for example, and then only 3 years. But then this Brackla was filled in there for 15 years, so still very fresh. And I suppose, Leanne, that would make sense with the tropical fruit character coming through from the spirit, and then that spice being quite an active oak influence, you know. You know, and a big part of our job is not just about, you know, maturing whiskies and choosing the right time to bottle it. But choosing the right time to bottle it is key as well, because I think this whiskey would have anything beyond the time that it's been in the cask, it might have started to deteriorate slightly. You know, that cask is quite active, and any longer, you know, that spice element might have started to take over a bit too much, overriding the tropical character, which, so it's a big part of what we do, as well as having to identify, you know, if this whiskey is going to get any better, or is it going to get any worse if we leave it any longer? And that certainly is a difficult decision because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't have a time machine. We can't jump forward and taste it in 5 more years, but we have a bit of experience and have made mistakes in the past to be able to identify these things. And, I think timing is spot on with this one, in our opinion. Hope you agree.
So Jenny says banana, springtime feeling quite enjoyable. And Marek says long, sweet finish. And Quinn says pecan or pecan, depending on where in the country you're located.
In the South.
Yes. Yes. I kind of think it has that nice little like floral and fruity taste to it. And has a touch of the oak spice. So I agree with your comment, Paul, that it was time, that any more cooking in the cask might have put it over the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So good timing selection.
Yeah, no, it's good that's because most people, they don't appreciate that we all get excited about very old whiskies. Of course we do. They are expensive, they are rare by definition. But I'm sure everybody in this, all the faces I can see in front of me, I'm sure at one point you've tried a whiskey that you got excited about because it was very old and very dark and very rich, but then you tasted it and went, okay. That's a lot of oak, that's a lot of time, but that's it. That's all I'm getting, and there's a charm in, what we trying to do when, again, talking about that balance, and here we are, I think I've said the word 5 times now, but what there's a charm in identifying where it came from. What's the point in flooding the wonderful character of Royal Brackla Distillery with oak or sherry, or leaving it too long just because the darker it gets, the older it gets, the sexier it becomes, and it becomes easier to sell. That would be tempting. Of course it is, because we're here to sell whiskey to make money. But the fundamental priority we have is to put good whiskey in the bottle, and that's fundamental. We're a small company. There is only 4 of us in the team. So there's Gregor, the founder, Gregor Hanna, myself, and then Gavin and Alex, who work in the warehouse. Those are the guys who put the labels on and put the whiskey in the bottle for us. So if you buy a bottle and any of your labels are a little bit squint, or the number on the bottle is just slightly off, then that must have been sampling day that day, because everything's done by hand, which is a nice thing to know. But so the point I was getting, we're a small team, and to be honest, as much as we would like to grow, and sell double the amount of whiskey, and Gregor could sell his Fiat 500 car and buy a Lamborghini, that would be nice. But we're at a great point where we don't have too much pressure to bottle whiskey. We don't have to put anything in the bottle. If it's not ready, or it's too overcooked, or whatever it may be, then it goes somewhere else. So those decisions are much easier to make when you don't have that pressure to basically to make up numbers. We're not in that position. I know a few other independent bottlers, and I'm not naming names, who have they have this they're just so big that they just need to bottle whiskey to fulfill. And the thing that really shocks me is the thought of, and I know this happens, that casks are bottled when they're never tasted by anyone in the senior team in that company. It's just name a number and fulfilling, and that breaks my heart. But anyway, it is what it is.
I do want to add for you, Paul, is the bottles themselves from Lady of the Glen are beautifully designed. I don't know if it's silk screening, but it's different from most any other independents that we see. And the label is very descriptive of all the detail in terms of when it was distilled and the date that it was bottled. It has some tasting notes on here. And then another thing that I think really sets the attention to detail part between of the Glen and other independent bottlers is you have the custom capsules. And these don't just look pretty, but I do think, they kind of act as an anti-counterfeit measure, so that if people were to see this 10 years from now and want to buy the bottle at auction, with this capsule, it's not like a standard black capsule. It's something that at least adds a little bit more security to the bottle, which is, I think, a really nice value add, and not something that everyone else does, but is, part of the complete package that you get with a Lady of the Glen bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very, very proud of that. I think the feedback is very positive with the packaging. I'm glad you brought it up, Howard, because it's something that I forget about. As important it is as the amount of effort and work that we put into getting that. I'll be perfectly honest with you here. It took Gregor a long, long time to get to a nice, happy space. And include, I'm guilty too. We're not very good at marketing. We're not very good at seeing opportunities, and we don't like to spend too much on that. But yeah, we've got to a happy place with the look and the feel of the bottle. Functionality, like you said, it is a pretty bottle, but you can see we've squashed a lot of information onto that little label on the front. And that's so that we don't take away too much from the wonderful design that's unique to us. It's a design company based not far from where I am in Glasgow, who designed the Scottish wildflowers on the bottle. And those are, it's not etched on, it's a form of kind of painting onto the bottle with a bit of a heat from an oven. Which is great because it doesn't flake off. It doesn't. It's not like Tipex where you could rub it off. It makes a big difference. And yeah, I mean, packaging is important. We are premium whiskies at the end of the day, and it just completes the package for you. And as I say, I don't talk about packaging too much because a wise friend of mine from a different company once said, "Well, you can't drink the packaging, but you still have to look at that." And I think I'm a whiskey drinker first and foremost. So yes, I'm sitting here as the brand representative for these whiskies that you have in front of you. But I'll also go into a whiskey shop with my pocket money and go and buy bottles of whiskey. And it's something I think we tend to forget about in our position, where we do use all 5 of our senses when deciding a bottle of whiskey. First of all, yeah, you want to know how good it tastes, but before you've even had the opportunity to sample that whiskey, if the shop that you're in is lucky enough to have a sample, you're looking at that bottle. You probably pick it up, you touch it, you have a complete sensory approach to deciding if that whiskey is for you or not. So yeah, it's important, and I hope it works for you guys as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Should we move to the next dram?
Yes. Glen Spey. I've got that one.
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, so whiskey number 2 is from so Lady of the Glen, as I mentioned, is our premium, our key brand, the top of the range. It's the brand that we've had since day one, and basically right up for 10 years of the company, we had Lady of the Glen as our only brand. But as Howard and Melissa quite rightly said, we have our own warehouse, and we moved into that warehouse 4 years ago. But we always had a view to creating another brand to complement Lady of the Glen. And that comes from the fact that Lady of the Glen, as by nature, is single casks. So therefore, they are limited in their the yields that we can get from those casks. 230 bottles, 300 bottles sometimes. So that can only go so far. And a few of our customers around the world were wanting more volume. I'll just give you an example. That Royal Brackla, 232 bottles. And we work with some big markets in the Far East. And so when we send out the list of the new whiskies, they say, "Oh, that looks fantastic, really appealing. How many bottles can we get of that?" And, by the time we've divided all the allocations around the world, we get back to them and say, "Well, you can have 18 bottles. Is that okay?" 18 bottles. Have you seen the size of this country? So the natural progression then was to create a brand that allowed us to have a bit more volume. So we created Dalgety. The Dalgety is our small batch brand, and I do that small batch because it's a term that you'll hear a lot within whiskey to determine something that's not as not as the same quantity as the core brands. And something I quite like to do a lot is contrast and compare. We're a small company. I mentioned that. We're the biggest selling single malt in the world, or whether it's 1 year or not, Glenfiddich or Glenlivet's. But I'll use Glenfiddich as an example where earlier on this year I was working up at the Spirit of Speyside Festival and went into the distillery at Glenfiddich, and as I say, the whiskey geek in me, the whiskey drinker in me, gets really excited at the thought of a distillery exclusive. You've made the effort to go to the distillery, and they're presenting you with something that they say you can only buy. Here's your reward for coming to visit. And they used the word small batch, small batch distillery exclusive. And I said to the charming young girl in the shop, I said, so what do you mean by small batch? How many bottles is that? 45,000. Right, okay. That's a small batch to a monster like Glenfiddich. So anyway, just to give you a bit of context, Dalgety, our small batch, we are dealing with, instead of single cask whiskies in the form of Lady of the Glen, we now have 2 casks, sometimes 3, but mostly 2 casks. So small batch to us is 681 bottles of this, which is a lot of one whiskey. We know it's a lot of one whiskey for us to work with, but you get the context that I was providing there. So anyway, Dalgety, small batch. So we're not in single cask territory now. 2 casks together, and I should say as well, we don't bottle these at cask strength. So this one, your Glen Spey you have now is 50.2%. And of course, you're now thinking, well, it's not cask strength, so why on earth did you land on 50.2? And that's a really good question. And do you know what? It actually gives me a great opportunity to sell a little bit of our story as well. When we created this brand, we knew we were going down in set strength, and we couldn't decide between 46, 48%, 50%, whatever it may be. But we bottled the first batch. Now this has gone back 2 years ago when the first batch of Dalgety. I think it was a whiskey from Craig Ellicky distillery we were bottling, and we were putting some water into the whiskey, just in a measuring jar, not into the cask yet. Much water to add to bring it down to 50%. So we kept adding a little bit of water, testing the strength, add a little bit more water, test the strength, and it got closer to 50. But of course, as we were adding the water, we were also tasting it as it was going along the way. And we noticed it was absolutely fine right up until it got to the point of 51%. We added a splash more water, took it down by 0.5% of alcohol, and the whiskey completely changed. It's the taste profile completely fell off the face of the earth, and we just immediately said to ourselves, well, we can't go down to 50. This whiskey is so much inferior at 50%. But then Gregor and I just looked at each other, and just almost identical timing. We just had a moment where we both went, why do we need to go to a set strength? We have our own warehouse, we have our own bottling hall, we're in charge. Why don't we ask the whiskey what strength it would like to be bottled at? And that's basically what we did from that point. So the whiskey, we add water till we get to a point where we feel it's at its optimal in terms of drinkability, but also the flavour profile is retained within that. And so therefore, any of the Dalgety products that you see throughout the years will always have a different ABV. And so this one's 50.2 because that's the strength. That's as much water as we could get away with adding before the whiskey became less of an appealing product. So yeah, Glen Spey. So moving into Speyside now. To be honest, as much as I think Glen Spey produce a great whiskey, it's probably one of the most boring distilleries in Scotland, and if the owners of Glen Spey are tuning in to listen to me now, I do apologise. But even the name Glen Spey, it sounds like a cheap brand made for a cheap Scottish television programme. So, it just doesn't, and it does not inspire anyone to be curious. But if you follow independent bottlers, if you like consuming independent bottled whiskies, you will know that it could be the worst distillery in the country. It could be the worst reputation of a distillery, But every distillery, no matter how good or bad, has good and bad casks in that warehouse. As unexciting as the name is, as unexciting as the distillery is, if you drive past it in the little town of Rothes in the centre of Speyside, not very exciting to look at. But they make very good whiskey, and that's all that matters. So from now on, we'll refer to it in a good light because we picked a couple of good casks here. So yeah, on the label you'll see it's bottled from 2 port casks, and this is where we combined 2 sister casks of this Glen Spey whiskey, and combined them, let them marry together with that water, to let that all the flavours come together before bottling. Now, the 2 casks that we've used for this one, there's a really interesting story and a little bit of a happy coincidence that we managed to come to with this one, where so it goes back to what we are fundamentally all about, and that is working with the whiskey in the cask and making choices for the final journey of that whiskey. Of course, being an independent bottler, that we don't distill the whiskey, we can't control how that whiskey's produced. But what we can control is the minute when we take that cask into our warehouse, when we are owners of that cask, we are now in charge of the rest of the journey of that whiskey. So it's something, that's the side that we invest our time, our effort, our money in, is creating the best product we can with the time we have with that whiskey. So we work with a lot of great suppliers all over the world to source some casks. We've got we get some great sherry casks from Spain. We get some wonderful port casks from Portugal, funnily enough. So we work with a couple of companies in Portugal, one of which is called Josepher, and they're a very small company, which is great because so are we. We're a small company as well. And they can supply the kind of volumes that we need to get the casks that we want to work with. And again, just a little example here. I always like to compare Glenfiddich. I'll bring them back in again. So when they contact their supplier of sherry casks in Spain or wherever it may be, hopefully Spain because that's where they make sherry, they will pick up the phone and say, right, we need to order some casks. Okay, no problem. Container loads of casks do you want? And they will say 6-7 container loads of casks. And I remember when Gregor picked up the phone to phone a new supplier in Portugal and asked them, we would like to buy some casks. And they said, how many would you like? And we said, maybe somewhere between 6 and 10. And they said, okay, yeah, we can supply you 6 containers. Oh, no, not 6 containers, 6 casks. All right, sorry, but you're dealing with the wrong company. So basically where I'm going with that is, we're a small company. We like to work with suppliers who are also in tune with that as well, small companies. And Joseph, although they're growing and they supply a lot of even bigger distilleries now, they still have the time and capacity to work very closely with ourselves as well. So anyway, they contacted us last year and said, we've got this new product that we'd like to let you try free of charge. We're going to send you 2 casks, and we call them Super Porto casks. And we were saying, okay, that sounds interesting. Well, the thought of getting free casks to use was very interesting, but also the fact that they were willing to work with us to get this experiment. So we asked them, what's the story with the casks? Well, basically, we were using a premium port to season the casks with the best quality wood we can. And I won't bore you with any more details, but it's a very expensive cask compared to a normal port cask that we would source from the supplier. So anyway, when they arrived, we're really excited. We picked 2 whiskies to put into these 2 casks. One of them was a Glen Spey, as we're getting to the story here. I realize I'm talking a lot, but we'll get to the punchline in a minute. But yeah, one of them was Glen Spey, so we put it in there. And normally the casks that we source from this company, we can easily put the whiskey in there and not forget about it, but we can leave it for 6 months at least before we really need to go and visit that cask to look at it to see if the flavors are working together with the spirit. So that's what we assumed wrongly, because after 3 months, a little instinct between us made us want to look at this cask. And after only 3 months, we opened the cask and poured a glass, and it came out like the color of a deep red wine. And we both looked at each other and went, "Oh shit!" Basically, it turned it into a complete fruit bomb. And you, as I mentioned before, we're very passionate about balance and getting that balance right. Well, this is an occasion where that balance was completely thrown out the window. It became all about that port. So we're very excited to see the colour of the whiskey, but unfortunately, we put a very light-bodied whiskey in there. Anyway, the point of the story here is the fact that we always identified this cask as a potential for our Dalgety brand. And fortunately, we had a sister cask that we had put into a refill port cask many months before this, with a view of leaving it for probably 2 or 3 years in that refill, bearing in mind it's a refill port cask, so it's had other whiskey in there before, so therefore second time round it takes a lot longer to get to the desired effect. But what that allowed us to do was, when they were combined together, this fruit bomb, Ribena, red wine, when combined with the cask that wasn't quite at its full potential in port yet, when we brought them together, we got that all-important balance, and that's what you have in your glass just now. So yeah, combination of two different types of port cask that met in the middle very nicely. And I think it's just a great example of quality classic Speyside style whiskey, but with the influence of well selected port casks and the flavours that those bring as well. Yeah. So a little bit about the brand as well. Dalgety, as you can see, quite different from the feel and the look of the Glen. That was always part of the plan when putting together this brand. In terms of the name, quite important. So Dalgety is basically the name of a town that we call Lobo. So we're based now in a town called Dalgety. If you know Scotland at all, you know where it is the famous Fourth Road Bridge, or Fourth Bridge that goes across the into the region of Fife. We're basically just on the other side of that bridge in a little town called Dalgety. As I mentioned, good marketing at all. So we're trying to come up with a name this new brand. Scratching our heads, just really stuck, because we've got no clue about what to do these things. Happened to look out the window and both went, "This is a nice place. Why don't we just call it Dalgety?" So that's what we settled on. But also it does have a little bit of a vacation. So we go back to the theme of Lady Glen with Whisky, Scotch, flowers of Athol. Well, Dalgety in Old Scottish basically means thorns. So Dalgety Bay means the Bay of Thorns. So it ties in nicely the whole theme of flora and fauna in Scotland as well. So yeah, hope you enjoy this one. Very different from our first one, a little bit more richness now, and I say that port influence should be coming across. Just really nice, easy drinking fruity whiskey.
Very nice.
Yeah, very good. On the nose, I was getting a great sweet cherry right up front, and then it turned to like a raspberry cobbler, and raspberry is a sweet fruit, a little tartness, but the cobbler part is there's like little crust. It's kind of sugar coated crust that you get the sweetness of that. It made it really nice.
Fantastic notes, yeah.
We have some notes from the audience too. So we've got Quinn says butterscotch, and gardenia. And Merrick says, again, we get cherry, cranberry, and plum on the nose. Jenny, light on the nose, some type of candy lingers, a tad of pepper. Caitlin says, love the rose gold color, creme brulee, black cherry, and black currant on the palate. And Mike says, I like this one with a drop of water. And then Brady says, a little sweet tobacco on the nose.
Cherry carries through.
Right.
So it appears we can hear the panel. Caitlin's saying we can hear now. Can you speak again, Paul? We were getting some feedback that you were breaking up when you were going over the.
Okay, yeah, well,
It seems to be a little.
I'm here now.
Okay.
Can you?
It might just be
Yeah,
that
so
If
you're
you're
coming in from Scotland to the US and then out to YouTube and to everyone. So hopefully it's better now for people.
yeah, I hope so. Hope so. But we can only keep going anyway, and if anything gets missed out or you can't hear, then yeah, just feel free to ask away. Questions are good. Questions are good because they remind me to say things that I might forget to say during the presentation anyway. So all good.
looks like we're back on track now.
Yeah.
Most people are saying they can hear.
Yeah.
Good.
This Dalgety was one of my personal favorites on the shipment in. I thought it was really innovative and it showed a lot of the craftsmanship and artisanship of Hannah whiskey merchants able to create this marriage of the two casks that was much better as the sum than either of the parts could be alone. I get all the rich fruits and it's really nice and creamy for me and the color is impressive too. My glass is now empty, but it used to have really great color before I finished it. So just terrific work. Hopefully the first of many more
Yep.
Dalgettys that we got to bring into the US.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. And I'd say a little bit modest or a little bit embarrassed even about the situation with the Super Porto cask. But you're right. There is a bit of craftsmanship there, although it was a little bit of an accident in the sense. Although we still had the vision to then bring these whiskies together and create the final product, which we didn't plan it to work out that way. But making the most of what you have, and you know what? Yeah, really really happy with that. And of course the cask supplier immediately contacted us and said, "Can you provide some feedback on the casks and how they worked for you?" And so we had to tell them they were too good, in a sense, that whereby phones came across so prominent. Yeah.
So a port cask finish is one of my favorites. I just
Yep.
absolutely love it. But it can go really bad too. Because you'll get some it's any sherry cask matured whiskey to where you're questioning, am I drinking sherry or am I drinking whiskey? Am I drinking port or am I drinking whiskey? And some of them get really heavy handed. I can tell where the oh my moment would have been after that first tasting of that super cask of like, ruh-roh, what do we do? And so I'm going to use your word of balance. So kudos for the balance here because it rolls it into the sweetness. You get a punch bowl flavor absolutely there, but you get a depth to it too. And that's where like the notes of tobacco and chocolate and this kind of sturdiness in the middle, I think, is found with this particular dram. And that's not always really easy to get in a wine flavored or wine, expressed expression, especially port, because it is so very sweet and it can just go so over the top quickly. So yeah, this one is definitely balanced to the point where there's almost an underlying savoriness to it. For me, always for me, my palate.
That's very nice, though. Really nice.
So we have a couple more comments.
Yeah.
Merrick says this is one of the most interesting whiskeys I've tried in a while, and I think Merrick tries quite a few whiskeys. And he says it's balanced without being cloying. Jenny says, I always think when I'm tasting, where would I drink these? And the first one, I'm at a barbecue, spring, summer. The second one, I'm on the porch sitting with friends.
There you
So
go.
thank you for everyone in the audience for throwing the comments in. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. It's wonderful to think that the way you would choose to enjoy this whiskey and obviously all the tasting notes. And you notice that I don't talk about tasting notes too much, or haven't done so far anyway, or anything too specific, because again, it's all very personal experience. I'm always wary of using too many tasting notes because it does plant seeds, and I'd rather, if you're confident enough to come forward with what you're getting from it. And I think that's a wonderful thing about whiskey. And of course, everyone here will know exactly what I mean by that, where we're all very understanding that everyone gets something different from it. And, I still remember the first and only time I've ever been to a wine tasting And the first thing that I took away was the presenter, the instructor, or whatever you want to call expert, was telling you what you should taste in that glass. And basically, and not so many words, but basically saying, if you don't taste what I'm tasting, you need to practice, you need to drink more, you need to learn more. And I thought that was interesting, but with whiskey, no. We put tasting notes on the bottle, and I'm not going to read them out, because the tasting notes on the bottle, on the label, as practical as they are, and there's a good representation, they're not for you guys out there because you have the whiskey in your glass to make up your own mind. Those are for the unfortunate folk who don't have that luxury and, might want to decide on a bottle or two by reading what we got from it. So yeah, loving all the tasting notes, really nice. And especially the ones where, you're picturing yourself in a place. And I think the wonderful thing about whiskey is it has that ability, in just one sniff of a glass, can transport you to somewhere else. Whether that's because it's a memory, because you've tasted that whiskey, as Chris will well know, Islay, you put your nose in a glass of Islay whiskey. If you've tasted that whiskey on that wonderful island, at the distillery, immediately, no matter where you are, what time you're at, what the weather is, it immediately takes you back to Islay. Rain sweeping in sideways on the side of your face, freezing cold, you can't even feel your fingers, but that's what whiskey does. It takes you there. So fantastic. Thank you very much for the notes and the feedback.
Should we maybe take a moment to share the nice packaging that we appreciate that Lady the Glen did for the U.S. market of the drams? Maybe I'll blow up the screen here. It's okay. But if you're watching this and you want to taste along on a replay, we still have some of these left that are available for purchase at scotchdrinkersonly.com, and you can have a 50 ml sample from each of the full-size bottles, and it's a really nice package, and so we appreciate you doing this for us in the US market, Paul and team.
Yeah, no worries at all. I mean, there's nothing better than giving the opportunity to get the whiskey out there, and that ties in with the willingness to do these things and the enjoyment that comes from it, and that's sharing whiskey. They're a pain in the backside to put together those packs, but
yeah.
As I kept reminding Gavin and Alex, who they've still got blisters on their fingers from putting all the little caps on and trying to squeeze them into the bottles, it'll be worth it. Trust me.
Thank them for us.
Yeah, I mean, I will. They don't. They just give me a look now. But,
just thank them for their sacrifice.
Again.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'll do a wave for them.
Yeah, no problem.
Should we move to number 3, Paul?
Yes, let's do that. Yeah. Okay, so back to Lady of the Glen and back to single cask strength whiskies. I think we're moving up in the world now at 57.7%, but that's fine. We're warming up, getting into dram number 3. So yeah, this is a really interesting one for us actually, and it's a good little showcase or example of how independent bottling works if you're not too familiar with it. I mentioned before about how we buy casks, and we always have had a passion for sourcing casks, but also it's that journey that we can control the whiskey and take it on that journey. And so most of the casks that we buy or we own now, we purchased when they were 5, 6, 7 years old. 2 reasons for that, mainly because at that age they're much more affordable than a 10 or a 12-year-old. So the distillery or the broker who sells the casks, if they are 10 or 12 years old, they know they have a product that's a ready to bottle product, so therefore it acts as an extra premium. So buying whiskies at 6 and 7 years old, we get much better value, but also it gives us much more time and space to take that whiskey on that journey. And so the vast majority of the whiskies we bottle, the vast majority of the casks we buy, have been with us from that time, and we've had that time to work with them to create that final product. However, every now and then we do buy casks to supplement. If we're putting together an outrun for quarter 1, quarter 3, whatever it may be, we look at the portfolio we have, and if there's something missing, then we go out to market and we look at to see what we can buy that might be ready to bottle. And sometimes we come across a real shooting star, a gem in there that's just so happened. And this is what we're getting at with this one here. So it's from Blair Athol Distillery, a great distillery just in the town of Pitlochry. And if you come and visit Scotland, and if you land in Edinburgh, Glasgow, and you want to travel north, you will probably pass by this distillery just off of the main road that cuts right through Scotland on the way up to the Highlands. Pitlochry is a lovely little town. Blair Athol's a great distillery just right in that town with a great visitor centre. So go and visit if you can.
We visited it last time we were in Scotland, Melissa. They have a terrific bar too on site. The
washback bar is fantastic. Yeah, it's a great place to stop off, and I really recommend doing that if you have the chance. But yeah, visiting the distillery is wonderful. But for us, Blair Athol is a fantastic whiskey to work with. It's a classic Highland style whiskey, so it has a little bit more body than say Glen Spey that we just had before. So that little extra bit of weight, a bit of body that it has, it allows it to be a bit more flexible in terms of the casks that we use to mature the whiskey, or the choices that we make. Now, that aside, this is again another example like the whiskey we have. We can't take full credit for this whiskey because it arrived in a refill wine barrique. That's what we purchased it. It was fully matured for all its life, 10 years, in a refill wine barrique. And again, same procedure where we tasted it when it first arrived into our warehouse, and just immediately fell in love with that straight away. To the extent where we just said, no, does not need any help. It's just perfect at 10 years old, ready to bottle, and it fit perfectly into that quarterly release that we had in mind.
I think with this one, I see
it's a refill.
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
No, carry on.
I was going to say this one, out of all them so far, I see a lot of nice wood. Different though. We talk about getting transported back to, earlier times or something. You almost kind of takes you back to the wood you smelled as a child, like in school and things like that. There's something about the wood itself that it's unique.
Yeah, the kind of that's to me when the oak is in good balance, where you've got that kind of impression of the oak, but without being dominating, you still get the distillery character coming through. So yeah, the story with this one is refill wine barrique, and when we released this, we got so many questions because we are quite forward with the information. We're whiskey geeks as well. So everyone was asking what type of wine was this? Was a red wine? Yes, it was a red wine, but that's all we know because being a refill cask, all the original identifiers of the wine were taken off of the cask when it was. So again, probably like the Brackla, I would suggest that this whiskey was, and the previous whiskey, was matured in there for maybe 4, 5, 6 years, no more than that, and then refilled with the Blair Athol and really matured for all its life. So
Paul, would it be European oak? Spanish or French oak?
The wine, the previous contents, but it's so subtle. Yes, French oak. French oak. That's all we know because there was no other identifiers on the cask. There wasn't even any stencil or etching on there. Either it was a French oak barrique. So, but again, as wonderful as that is, and we want to take credit for sourcing great casks, but this is if anyone doesn't know what I mean by the wonderful world of refill casks, I mentioned before, fresh sherry, dark whiskey, as dark as Guinness, as dark as wine, really appealing on the shelf, really appealing if you had to pick that over something that was very pale, but it's got to have balance. And this is just a wonderful example of that, where you have this just a hint of the wine cask, but yes, Leanne, you're getting the oak as well. That French oak, the spice, the unique spice that you only get from French oak is still there. And I think we've got the best out of this cask. I've no idea what the whiskey was like that was in there before. I suspect it would be very fruity, very rich, but we get the best out of this cask the second time around. I certainly believe here, and I think this is a wonderful whiskey and a good example of what can be done and what's available out there, and also given the patience and the rewards you get from patience and not being thinking that you need to force whiskey out there into very active, very strong influence casks.
We share your enthusiasm for refill casks. I like to make the joke that I like whiskey flavored whiskey. And so when you have these refill casks, you can get a lot more of the distillery character, and just it can be very complementary and work in ways that with a first fill you don't quite get. Not that we don't like the first fill too, but it's good to have diversity and different flavors, and you know this one for me works really, really well.
Very unique.
Yes, very nice. Very well
it's
balanced.
distinctive. Yeah.
We have a couple comments from the audience. Caitlin, and I'm guessing Brendan is over there with her, says honey on the nose. Merrick, for any woodworkers, it reminds me of turning green wood, fresh and fragrant. And Caitlin agrees with that. And Jenny says very fragrant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, again, wonderful. The tasting notes, the feedback is fantastic. And I did say in the previous whiskey that I don't talk about tasting notes too much, but I cannot ignore, or I can't not mention the story that we got with this one here, where we all sat there, as do sit down to do the tasting notes together for whiskies. And we fling out all these tasting notes and different words and different experiences. We all come from different backgrounds, so that works very well. But we were all getting this specific note we all agreed on. The problem is the note wasn't such a great sounding tasting note for whiskey. It wasn't so friendly in terms of, well, people are going to read this without tasting it. But it was so distinctive that we just had to put it on the label, even if there was a risk of it having a detrimental effect to someone choosing this whiskey. And so you'll see on there how, Parmesan cheese.
Yeah.
We all got Parmesan cheese on the nose. And so it was so distinctive that we just had to put it on there. But yeah, we do worry that someone reads that without tasting it and going, that sounds disgusting. I mean, I like
there was definitely a funk on the
Parmesan
front end
cheese,
of it.
but not in my whiskey.
Yeah. But
The
a good
funks are
funk.
not bad.
Yeah, it's just here. The minute you get it on the palate, the oak and the fruits, and it comes over. But then you go back in with the nose, and it's still there. But wonderful world of whiskey we have.
Yeah. We like
Very
Parmesan. I get the orange too that was suggested too. The orange fondant. That is pretty strong for me also.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Fantastic. So I mean, just a little bit of background again. So as I mentioned, Gregor founded the company back in 2012, and I think I mentioned too that he ran the business all by himself up until March of 2020, where I wasn't happy in my previous job, and so I knew Gregor, and I knew he might have been looking for someone. So gave him a text message. You still looking for someone? Because I'm ready. And we met for a pint and a dram, or a half and half, or a hoff and hoff, as we call it in Glasgow. And the wonderful Pot Still in Glasgow. If you ever get a chance to go to the Pot Still bar in Glasgow, go in and get a hoff and hoff. So basically, a half pint of beer and we call it a half of whiskey or a hoff. I won't go into the history of where that word came from, but it's a measure of whiskey anyway. You get the point. And so basically, had a great conversation. And went and handed my notice in to my previous employer the next day, and I think this was on the 5th of March of 2020. And so I had a month notice to serve. And of course, changing jobs, changing like that is a big part of your life. It's something that's very significant in your life. But there was also something else that happened in March of 2020 that sort of changed everyone's lives for one reason or another. And of course, you know, the global pandemic made me question whether it was the right time to change jobs. And of course, my friends and family were also worried at the same time. And of course, it changed everyone's lives. You know, there's no denying that. And I'm never want to say for any, you know, that it was ever a good time, but certainly for whiskey, and for what it did for our company, and certainly for me starting in the job. People were drinking more whiskey. People were meeting online. They were doing these tastings. They were more adventurous. They had more money to spend. And so actually it was worked out as a bit of a kind of blessing in disguise. And I don't mean to say anything good about the global pandemic. Of course, it was horrible. And obviously lots of people lost some loved ones as well. But it was a good time to be able to sell whiskey. So it kind of eased the pain a little bit of, you know, changing jobs at that time. But also 2020 was a huge year for us in the sense of, obviously, Gregor had someone on board with him to share the burden and to get the word out there. But we also took the keys to our own warehouse in the late part of that year as well, August or September of 2020. And I cannot understate how significant that has been. Howard, you touched on it, how wonderful it is to have our warehouse, but I cannot in words explain in this format how significant that's been for the company. You're already getting a feel for how passionate we are, how hands-on we are with the casks. Now, before having our own bottling hall and our own warehouse, we had to contract bottling out to a bottling hall where we send them the casks, we send them the bottle, they send us a bill, and we get the bottles at the other side. But even the small bottling hall that we were working with, the demand became as such for bottling. So we would basically 8 months in advance have to identify which casks we wanted to bottle for that period. And you'll know where I'm coming from because we've spoke about very active casks, but that decision is so difficult to make a choice of which casks to re-rack into other casks. You know, which casks to bottle, because we don't know in 8 months' time how active that cask is going to be. So that's what gave us the incentive to open our own bottling hall. And, you know, even to this day, it still remains a very unique thing for such a small independent bottler to have their own bottling facility. But it's made a huge difference, as I mentioned, and given us that freedom, allowing us to be adventurous, very creative, but very spontaneous as well. You know, some of the decisions that we can make are based on just a random check of casks sometimes when we taste them and go, oh my goodness, this needs to be bottled, or we can capture this moment right now. We don't have to wait months and months, and that moment could be gone. We can capture that moment. And so, you know, it gives us so much freedom, flexibility, and, as I say, allows us our little creative juices to go crazy.
Yeah.
And
it gives you such a level of quality control too, to monitor things where, you know, with a normal warehouse, you put in for the sample and then it goes on their schedule, and then maybe a week or a couple weeks later, you're able to get access to it. You're able same day that you have the idea to check on a cast to be able to monitor it. And that's just something that if you don't have the warehouse, there's no ability to do that. And the larger producers have so many casks that they can't possibly monitor. But you know, your size gives you the ability to have an eye on everything that is in that warehouse. And I think that that's a large driver of why you've had so much success in the industry when are compared to your peers.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, it's a great theory, you know, and being able to have, you know, what I've just explained there, that theory of being able to be selective with the cask and keep an eye on them. But the quality is there, the quality in the liquids. And of course, you mentioned before the awards. We're not too passionate about the awards. There's a lot of marketing involved with these awards, but at the end of the day, especially the Whisky magazine, the icons of whisky ones, they're great because they don't just they don't just taste your whiskey and decide on that. They look at your business as a whole. And your impact on your category, and so that is quite rewarding to get that as well. And so, but yeah, I mean, the results are in the liquid, and if we look back at our library of bottlings that we've done over the years since the warehouse, the quality and the growth has been there, and so it's justified every little bit of effort, to get that warehouse. And I say effort, none on my part. when Gregor said to me in April or May of 2020, oh, I'm thinking of moving into the warehouse, and I said, oh, a few years ago I worked with another company, and I heard all the horror stories with HMRC and getting over the customs and all the red tape that go with this. I said, Gregor, it's very, very, very difficult, and you've got to have everything in place. They want to make you fail, because basically that only the right people can get the keys to a warehouse. And he shocked me when he came back and said, oh, I've done all that. That's already done. We just need to find the place. We have the approval. So, oh, okay. Let's go. And so that was nice and smooth on my part as well. But yeah, wonderful. I mean, as I said, we're whiskey geeks as well. So you could tell that when you came to visit, we were just sharing drams as much as talking business. And so it allows us to our geeks to come out, and I hope that that comes across in the final product as well, and you can appreciate a bit of us in every dram as well. That sounds disgusting, but it's not what I mean. But you know what I mean. Anyway, all good.
Should we go to Dalgety? Or not that, the St. Bridget's Kirk? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I love this story. This is an incredible...
Let's do it, because I've got that one too, so I can join in again. Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, again, another new brand that we created a few years ago, or two and a half years ago now, to complement the brands that we had already. And now the story with this one is St. Bridget's Kirk is always created to be the brand that we have for our blended whiskies, whether they be blended Scotch, a mix of malt and grain, or blended malts that we've either already purchased in cask or we blended together ourselves. Now, this was necessitated by the fact that we had a few casks of whiskey that we purchased, casks of whiskey that were already blended. Now, quick background as to why that would happen. You've heard of Chivas Regal, Cutty Sark, brands like that, famous blended Scotch whiskies. Their basic ones sell millions of bottles all around the world, but they also have premium versions, 21-year-old, 25-year-old, etc. So the distilling companies would try and get ahead of the game, and what they would do is blend the whiskies when they were younger, then put them back into casks to mature and become older but marry together, which was fine back in the late 80s, early 90s, even into the 2000s, where these brands were quite successful around the world. But towards the end of the early noughties, the availability of single malts around the world just exploded. And so therefore, people switched off of the idea of buying premium blended whiskies. So the market deteriorated a little bit. So basically, all these casks of whiskey that were blended together, they became a bit of a surplus to requirements. So naturally, the distilling companies, if they don't have a requirement for them, they sell them onto the market. That's basically how it works with distilleries selling casks of whiskey. It's always surplus to their requirements. Anyway, the quality of these whiskies were so good, so hard to ignore, that we purchased them because the quality was so good. But it did, of course, leave us with a bit of a problem. When Gregor was buying these casks, he knew that Lady of the Glen, and then, of course, eventually Dalgety, everything about the brand, everything about the label is all to do with single malts. So if we ever had a plan to bottle these fantastic whiskies, we would always need to create a new brand. Anyway, so that's where St. Bridget's Kirk came from. A little bit quick story on the name. Again, paying tribute to where we are from, our home, Dalgety Bay, right on the coast, has a wonderful medieval ruined church called St. Bridget's Kirk. funnily enough. And just a wonderful little spot there, bit of history. And it's the history that really inspired us to use this name as the name for the brand. And I won't go into too much detail, but basically, once upon a time, the city or the town of Dunfermline, not too far from where we are, Dunfermline for a short time was the capital of Scotland. And of course, now we know it's Edinburgh as the capital. But there would have been a transition period of becoming one capital to the other. And Dalgety Bay would have been one of the main landing points across the sea from Edinburgh to Dunfermline. So the history that must have happened passed through this. I mean, that's why the church was built there in the first place, because it was the main landing point for people traveling, So, if walls could talk, wonderful stories. But anyway, we were inspired by the story of that. So basically, we have 3 versions of St. Bridget's Kirk. One for blended malts, one for blended Scotch, a mixture of malt and grain. But then we also created this one here. So if you see the one with the kind of brown bottom, this is our Solera version. So Solera. Now, Solera comes from the sherry industry in Spain, whereby the bodegas will have a pyramid of casks where they produce the sherry. They put the youngest wine in at the top. They bottle the wine from the bottom rack of casks. And then as they bottle that, they top up from the one above and all the way to the top of the pyramid. So they do that for consistency, but they also do that because, in theory, in every one of those casks, there's a little bit of wine that's been in there for years and years and years, and you're mixing all the time with the newer wine, and it just creates that little bit of consistency across that product that they're producing. So, in complete contrast to what we try to do with whiskey, whiskey is not about consistency. Whiskey is about straightforward, maturing so that it gets older, and you can put that age on the bottle. We love the idea of the Solera system, and we wondered if we could incorporate that into something that we do. Again, all going back to the fact that we have this warehouse, our creative juices were flowing, and we thought to ourselves, could we incorporate a system like that into whiskey? Now, it was 5 casks of a blend that we made together. So 5 hogsheads, which 250 litres, quite a lot of volume of the same whiskey, which, a small company gave us a little bit of a headache. So that helped give us a wee avenue or some sort of process that we could put that whiskey through in the Solera system, whereby we would be topping it up each time we bottle. We would top it up with some of the blend, and it would change. In theory, it would change over time. So this is basically, we're on now to, is it batch 2? You guys
It is
have
2. It is batch 2 we got.
2, I think you have of the. Perfect. So yeah, batch 2. We're now on to batch 3. We have bottled batch 3 recently, but I'll be perfectly honest. Batch 2 was probably one of my favourites out of the 3 so far, because the 3 casks that we have. So it's made up of 3 casks. I do have a photo on my phone. Hang on, and show you. Yeah, so you can see that. So yeah, so it's 3 little casks. Those are 100-litre casks, and as you can see, they're connected with pipes, which is not how the sherry industry work. But we thought we would just connect them all with pipes, and basically we I don't know if you can see at the bottom there. There's a little spigot tap that we bottle from. We're really utilizing technology here, as you can see. In case anyone had any doubts that everything we do is by hand, that should give you an example. So yeah, basically they're made up of 3 different fresh sherry casks. So the bottom 2 are Oloroso, and the top one is a Fino sherry cask. And of course, the theory is we filled them up with 300 litres of this blend, of which we had over 1,000 of, into these casks, just let it marry for a few months, and then we bottled from that cask at the bottom with the spigot. Now, emptied the entire contents of that became batch 1. But of course, as we emptied that, gravity pushed the whiskey from the top through the pipes into the next one, and that emptied the one at the top. It never quite emptied it. That not emptying the casks, just getting to the point where there's a little bit left in each one. And then, of course, we topped that up with the more of the original blend, and basically just trying to create a little bit of a following. You know, if you like this whiskey, buy batch 2, buy batch 3, just to try and see the journey of this whiskey. And we're absolutely delighted with the results. So if you're tasting this now, or even if you're still like nosing it, if you're tasting it, you'll see that it's quite smoky. So we're now at this point in the tasting where we've got smoky whiskies to go, which is usually the way it goes towards the end of the tasting. And so basically the blend of whiskies we have here, I'll tell you the 5 whiskies we have in there. Not that they're too exciting, but you know, it's good to know all the same. So we've got whiskey from Inchgower, Off Brusk, Ben Rinnes, Kalila, and Ben Nevis. So Ben Nevis is a peated version of Ben Nevis we have in here.
We love Ben Nevis.
And so Ben Nevis is great, yeah. But what's really interesting about this particular blend, the 4 whiskies, with the exception of the Ben Nevis, are all 8 to 10 years old. Well, they were 8 to 10 years old before they went into the Solera. But the Ben Nevis is only 4 years old. But because it's peated, heavily peated, it has that smokiness that kind of takes away a bit of the youth. But it gives the whiskey a bit of a vibrancy as well. So anyway, great fun. I hope you don't think we're all mad. It is a little bit mad. And of course, anytime we create a new brand, which is the Scotch Whisky Association, for approval, and they exist to protect the integrity of Scotch whisky. They do a great job of doing that. A lot of people think that they put a lot of limitations on innovation with Scotch whisky. Now you can see where I'm going here, because what we've got here with this Solera system is by definition innovation. And I'm sure one of the awards that we won was because we are quite forward with this innovation. So that we were very nervous what the Scotch Whisky Association were going to say about this, because there's a lot of things that go against their rules, if you like, about what should be defined as Scotch whisky. The main one being because, you know, we put age statements on most of our whisky, so you always know how old the whisky is. So they immediately got very nervous about the thought of topping up. Especially combined with the fact that we have copper pipes going into the cask, which is a big no-no when it comes to maturing Scotch whisky. But on this whisky, it will never have an age statement on the Solera version. So immediately they were happy with that. And they also, the minor caveat as well was we could not at any point on the label suggest that within the Solera system the whisky was continuing to mature. So as far as they're concerned, the minute we put the whiskey into the Solera, it stops maturing. You know, which is great, because can you stop time? I can stop time. Yeah, I've got a magic watch that can stop time and stop maturing. No, but quite, you know, basically, yeah, we can't suggest that the whiskey's getting older in the Solera, but of course, we know it is. It's sherry casks. It's taking an influence from that sherry cask, and that's what contributes to the final product in your glass. So in terms of strength, 48.5, that's deliberate. We took it down to 48.5. Again, just to make this whiskey much more approachable, much more accessible in terms of price as well, all helped by the lower strength on this one. So anyway, lots of information there, lots to take in. Any questions about it, just ask away. Hopefully you enjoy it, because it's a little bit of fun. I'm not even going to pretend that it's the best whiskey on the lineup. In fact, it's not by far anywhere near the best whiskey on the lineup tonight. But it's good bang for buck for this whiskey, and it's good fun at the same time. And you know what? Everyone has a place for a good fun bang for buck whiskey in their collection, in my opinion. Yeah, that's my sales pitch.
It's very nice. I think this is a great marriage or assemblage of those whiskeys, and it has that nice soft and sweet peat note, soft and sweet smoke note, with a little bit of toffee and some roasted nuts on the nose. I just think that is so nice, so pleasant, elegant.
A couple comments from the viewers. Merrick says, get a toffee sweetness on the palate. I don't know if that was from the last one or this one. Sorry, Merrick. That might have been the last one. I think his comment on this one was very jam-like. Sweet and fruity with a few chocolatey Snickers bars, toffee, and caramel notes. And I think Brady said some peat, a little peat. Yes, that's correct. Now that we've tasted it. Jenny says, does taste peaty, great taste. Merrick, very delicate peat notes present. Caitlin, delicious. Is St. Bridget's Kirk available in the US? Yes, it is. All 5 of the drams that we're tasting through tonight are available in the US on the Scotch Drinkers Only website. So thank you for asking, Caitlin. Brady asks, is there a higher ABV version of this one?
Yes, you have to come and try it straight from the Solera. There you go. That's an
I'm
Well, let's
invitation.
do that on the next trip over, Brady.
I'm a big fan of what you've done with St. Bridget's Kirk. I will say this is an example of one of the times where people like us put an order in and there's only so much available globally. And so we're only able to import into the US half actually of what we requested of this. And I'm glad you were able to get us the bottles you were able to get to the US market so we can share.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's not a big batch product. It's again,
Yeah.
you know, no more than 200 or just over 200 we tried to achieve with this one. Yeah.
It's brilliant though. I'm a big fan, as I said before, of Ben Nevis and Kulila, obvious, and so
Yeah.
the influence there is definitely right for my palate.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. That the smokiness from those are going to be the most. They're not going to dominate, but they're going to be more prominent. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Good.
I think
And
that the peat's very complementary to it. You know, it kind of like gives it a little boost and balances off the sweetness of it.
Yeah, I was thinking you were going to use the word balance there because we like that
I
word.
promise nobody's getting payola for balance. Throwing that over.
The word of the
But
day.
it is.
It's just a very nice blended malt, though. It really is.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the quality was there within the original casks. It just needed something, as I said, 5 casks of the same blend. They were in just refill hogsheads, so they weren't really doing anything in terms of maturing or developing in those casks other than getting older. So yeah, it just allowed us to be a bit more creative, and we're absolutely thrilled with the feedback so far. As I say, we're now on to batch 3. Such has been the success. We're now getting demand for batch 4, but we're like, we actually want to leave it in the a little bit longer, just so that each batch has its own time to develop and mature. And I think what the great thing about the Solera is, because naturally over time, each time we fill it up, the influence of those sherry casks is going to become less. But in contrast to that, the whiskey is becoming older, and those whiskies are marrying together and becoming more in harmony. So, the first few batches, if you like that influence of the sherry and combined with the peat, then great. But over time, you'll start to see a more sophisticated whiskey coming out of the Solera. And I think, we'll get to a good peak and then we'll run out. We'll have to come up with a new plan, which we have discussed so far, but we have no idea what we're going to do when this particular blend runs out. But as you can see, we'll probably get maybe 5 or 6 batches of this particular blend. Then we'll have a decision to make, which I don't think will be made anytime soon.
Terrific.
I
Should we
think
go
if I could make one real quick point, is that I think we really, as enthusiasts and people that really get into whiskey, at least on this side of the Atlantic, we get hung up on single malts a lot. And quite frankly, the market is not here for blended malts. I mean, you go to your, XYZ liquor store and there's maybe 2 or 3, and that's really not there. To be able to have access to the blended malts that I get when I go to Scotland is truly amazing. So kudos for like bringing that part over for you guys, listen, Howard, but also for y'all diversifying your products enough to make a good quality blended malt that's not going to be something I have to go to the store to get. So yay.
Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Cheers, guys. Yeah, again, I suppose it's worth mentioning as well. I mentioned about single malts being more widely available, and blends are always going to suffer. Unfortunately, for the vast majority of people, when you mention the word blend, it immediately puts you on the back foot, as if to suggest that it's an inferior product. And of course, that comes from the dozens and dozens and dozens of very basic blended scotches out there that make up 86% of all Scotch whisky sold around the world is very basic blended Scotch. Johnny Walker Red Label, Famous Grouse, Dewar's, things like that. So it's hugely important to the world of whiskey. But unfortunately, that's then now what people define as a blend. So when you've got a small independent bottler like us trying to sell a blend, what we are trying to do is remind people that why did blending start in the first place? For a different reason that happens now. These blends are based on huge volumes, huge consistency, and very cheap prices, and they need to blend to do that. But of course, where did it start? Blending whiskies was an art form at one point, where people were taking whiskies from one place that was maybe a little bit too strong or too harsh on its own, but when combined with this other whiskey from this other place, which was maybe too light on its own, came together to create, whereby the sum was better than the individual parts. So we're not alone in the world of independent bottling, where we're blending whiskies to try and take that back to what blending should be about, what it actually means to be blending whiskies and what you're trying to achieve. Many happy accidents have happened over the years, but we have a very interesting whiskey here, and it's interesting because of the story that I told you about the Solera, but also because we've got 5 very interesting component parts, all playing their part in the
Very
harmony
high
that
quality
comes to. Yeah,
malts too.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, all the inputs into it were from prestigious distilleries and really good liquid, and the output just is the result of that.
Yeah, good. Thank you. We'll keep up the good work.
Please do.
Right, I'm really excited to get on to the last whiskey. I'm really excited to talk about this one. I'm sure you guys are as enthusiastic about it as I am.
Oh yeah, maybe more.
Okay, so yeah, the last but certainly not least, we're moving on to over to Isla, to a place that's very close to my heart, and Chris as well, I would imagine. And obviously, really excited to talk about this whiskey because it is a great example of a great partnership, we think anyway, where we have this wonderful 9-year-old Caol that is exclusive for Scotch drinkers only, and just a wonderful way to celebrate this this partnership that's hopefully going to only grow and develop and allow us to blossom in the market as well. So and hopefully there'll be more of these to come as well. So
We hope so.
yeah. I kind of feel like I want you to talk about this whiskey, Howard, a little bit as well, because it's your experience and your choice of cask that led to this being bottled for you guys. So you can tell us a little bit of your experience when you came to the warehouse and chose this one.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with I always have a love for Coolila whiskey. My father and I actually shared it at a dram of Coolila when we were in Scotland a few years ago, and we're not on Isla. We visited Isla another time, but on that trip we were actually in on the Isle of Skye, I think, and we weren't drinking Talisker at the local bar, but we were drinking Coolila, and it was just fantastic distillery. And I also want to say when we do tastings of like barrel tastings, it always seems boring to me, but I always gravitate towards that Pedro Jimenez cask that that the flavor of Pedro Jimenez, I think it marries really really well with Scotch whiskey, which is why I think it's so popular. So when we're talking to Gregor and he he told us that he had available Pedro Jimenez and Quilila, it was a no brainer. It was like this is the first cask that we should do. And so we were just I don't even think it took 15 minutes for us to decide that this was one that we were doing for the US market, and we wanted all the bottles we could get. And when we got the bottles, and it's just a it's easy for me to say it's a fabulous whiskey because we're selling a whiskey, but just the I think the flavor and the aroma, and I do appreciate, you know, the integrity that Lady the Glen has that other people maybe might not. They might just leave things in, but we have absolute trust in Lady the Glen to say this is the right time for this to come out of the cask that it's in and to go into the bottle. And I couldn't, I couldn't be happier with how this came out, and I hope everyone enjoys it as much as we do. That's why we started the business, is to bring in, you know, special products like this and to share it with the U.S.
I
Yeah,
think.
no, and we're
I'm sorry.
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, it's obviously a really, I agree with all you were saying about this wonderful contrast of the Pedro Jimenez and the peat, which, if anyone has been following what we've been doing, you know, even from afar, you will notice, even if you go onto our website and look at the archive, you'll see we have bottled a lot of Kalila octaves from Pedro Jimenez. And on the face of it, that might seem a bit boring, a bit repetitive, but
Nope.
there's a good reason for that. Because if it works, it works. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Simple as that. It is a wonderful partnership. But again, you know, the idea of working with octaves, if you're not familiar with octaves, they are small 40 or 50 litre casks. Tiny little things. You can kick them about, you can stick them on your shoulder, fling them about, often bump into your shins, you know, really just the perfect height for clattering into your shin just below your knee. Never happened to me, of course. You know, I'm like a fairy around the warehouse, or, you know, angel share. That's what I am around the warehouse. So, but no, it's a wonderful thing that the little octaves, they are a pain in the backside because they're very small. You only get 50 or 60 bottles out of them. But the benefits of that smaller cask, much more intense maturation, much more full on, something that we've always done, even back days before we had our own warehouse, we were, you know, working with octaves, but of course the results were much more variable because simply we didn't have the control we have now. As soon as we opened the doors to the warehouse, what do you think was the first major purchase? We were on the phone to our friends. Actually, funnily enough, to the story with the Glen Spey, our friends in Portugal at Josifer, who also produce sherry casks as well. They buy the sherry from Spain and make their own casks. So they supplied these casks as well for us. You know, we ordered 24 of these little Pedro Jimenez casks because they just work so well. But of course, having that ability to be able to control the timing, you know, how long we leave it in there, when it gets bottled, and that spontaneity that I was talking about, and I heard you mentioned it, you know, it was only a few weeks, 2 weeks maybe, from being a nice round 10 years old. But you'll notice that if you look at other independent bottlers, we don't follow the rules in terms of 10, 12, 15, 18. You know, when it's ready, it's ready. And 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it may be, is a long time in a small octave cask in our warehouse. I mean, bearing in mind our warehouse is not like a traditional warehouse up in the Highlands with old stone floors and stone walls. It's quite warm. It gets warmer, so things happen a little bit faster as well. So capturing the whiskey at its peak, and especially if the customer's there to taste that exact cask and capture it when they consider it to be at the peak, is even better as well. So yeah, it's a formula that works with these octaves. And we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep being boring, because every single time we bottle, it's only boring on paper because it's the same distillery, it's the same cask type. But if you were to taste them all in a row, they would be completely different. The difference in the peat, the difference in the oak influence, and the difference in the influence from the Pedro Jimenez, as well as the only way I can describe what the Octaves do, they're very volatile. And so therefore you get volatile and variable results. And so much fun is had with working with these little casks. So we'll keep it going. Yeah.
We have so much gratitude that you made Kulila available to us. We know how hard it is to get these casks from Diageo, the producer, and
Yeah.
then the amount of effort, as you said, to buy the octaves that are not inexpensive, even though they're smaller, they're still quite pricey, and then to monitor it and to make sure that the quality was there, and to enable us to be able to bring this in. We just have a large amount of appreciation for that, Paul, from you and from Gregor and the rest of the team.
Yeah, happy to work. Yeah, it's definitely works well. That's, I mean, the octaves are perfect for that. The quantities you get from them, it's just the right kind of number as well. It makes it so exclusive as well. I mean, again, you guys are tasting this whiskey. There was only ever 57 bottles for the entire market. So, you know, if you like it, just finish that sentence. But if you like it, you know what to do.
Well, Paul, you had mentioned that's a boring thing, that you've done, but boring tastes great, Paul. You've done a great job on this, and because also you found that magic connection of the Koala to the Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. It's a great connection. It's you found it, and so thank you very much for sharing that.
Yes.
My pleasure.
So Merrick says, this one takes me back to Krakow, Poland. I had to cook my own steak in the bar at a communal fire pit. Produced these amazing smoky notes. That sounds like its own story, Merrick. Quinn says, Kulila equals my precious. Some of us probably agree with you on that. Jenny says, earthy on the nose, lovely roll on the tongue, delightful. Fred, my father-in-law and Howard's father, says, one of the most beautiful and meaningful nights of my life, a great jam, a wonderful sun, and a beautiful country. As Howard mentioned, we traveled with our parents to Scotland, my parents and Howard's parents, and a couple of our friends a couple years ago, and we had a tremendous time. The hospitality and, of course, the drams and the scenery of the country, just
It's
lovely.
an incredible country.
So.
If you haven't been to Scotland, you have to go. It's life-changing.
Merrick says,
I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
my favorite of the night, closely followed by the Dalgety, Slanche Ma. Brady says, sweet smoke, ash, wet newspaper, iodine, and musky. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I think Leanne and I can really appreciate Koila. This one's definitely a special dram, though. I for one would really like. I'll definitely reorder this one. They're all great whiskeys, though. Tonight, but this one is really nice. They did a great job with this one.
Oh, and I just want to echo that. I mean, Chris and I have each dug peat on Isla.
Yep.
My name is on a peat shed across from the airport. If you ever want to go grapes out there and see it, because the Southern girl knows how to dig dirt. And I'm just saying, there's something about the savory, smoky, sweet, deep South barbecue. You know, I've never run away from a smoky dram because we smoke everything down here, you know, right? And this is just, this was the highlight of the lineup for me tonight. Although every one of them I'd loved on my bar. So, wow, this is score one for being able to pick this one, because octaves are, golly, they're so finicky because so much can happen, right? But Sanjava, good job.
Yep. All of them were really nice. Thank you.
Oh man.
We have a coupon code for people on the webcast tonight, Melissa.
It is free ship LOG.
And so that's for the
So we have a
5.
bundle on there.
So there's a bundle on scotchdrinkersonly.com of all of the whiskeys tonight, and if you use the coupon code Melissa said, you get free shipping on the bundle.
So it's free FREESHIPLOG. So that will give you free shipping on that bundle. But just to let everyone know, the retailer does have a flat rate shipping, $19.99 on however many bottles you want to order. If you wanted to combine that with your friends or your neighbor or your family, feel free. So whether you order one or 15 if you're running a club or something like that, the shipping is $19.99, but we do have the free shipping coupon on there as well.
Okay.
And thank you everyone in the audience for joining in. I hope everyone enjoyed the drams. I know we picked out everything we chose to bring in the US, so we enjoyed all of them. I hope everyone else did as well. Thank you to Paul from
Thank you.
joining us from Scotland. I know it's getting late over there, so thank you so much. And to all of our panel, thank you guys for joining in too with
Thank
your
you.
notes and
Nightcaps.
thoughts on the
Yeah. I'd like to echo the thanks to Paul and our panel and everyone on YouTube. I hope everyone enjoyed their time here. We wanted to make it like a real tasting and have it interactive. Hopefully, it's the first of many we're able to do. Just incredibly appreciative of everyone's participation. So thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rob,
Thank you for having
again,
us.
We enjoyed it.
yeah,
and Howard and I
yeah,
are always
Yes, Paul.
no, just to follow that up and just say, yeah, thank you for making this happen, give me the chance to be able to tell the story. Obviously, get a little bit of the information out there. Feedback is great as well. But yeah, no, hopefully a few more to go, and we can only go from strength to strength. Cheers.
Cheers.
cheers. Thank you everyone.
Cheers.
On to y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm.
We ended the stream again. We do really appreciate